Okay.
All right. How did you first become interested in the issue of federal debt?
I don't know, Robert. I suppose when I paid my first taxes, I wonder what was going for it. I recall studying such things in high school and college, and then when I went into journalism, I veered off after a year or so of covering fires and crime to covering finance, and thereby acquired a professional interest in the public debt.
Okay.
So that goes back like 150 years, I guess, for me. Or just 50, actually.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And what era would you say that you're most interested in?
Well, I have a rather comprehensive interest. I began, I wrote a biography of John Adams, who was in some respects America's first junk bond salesman. America, when he was in the business of selling our debt abroad, was a speculative grade credit. A highly doubtful credit at that. We were in the midst of a not very successful war against Britain, as you recall. You weren't there, actually, but you probably read about it.
Almost.
Yeah. And I have written as well about the Civil War era. And then so I have taken a rather long look at all these. I guess my favorite, because my favorite figure in the history of debt is John Adams, wonderfully quirky character who went through the most extraordinary and initially unrepaying efforts to sell the Dutch on the idea of investing in this country that was not yet a country. Quite remarkable.
Very remarkable. What would you say the similarities were between John Adams and Alexander Hamilton?
There were very few indeed. I think certainly Adams despised Hamilton, and I think Hamilton held Adams in a certain contempt. Adams thought that Hamilton was kind of a show-off and a braggart and full of unsound ideas about money and banking. Hamilton, as you may recall, founded the Bank of New York, and by the lights of 21st century regulatory standards, it was extremely conservatively capitalized. But Adams had no faith in fractional reserve banking, regarded it as inherently speculative, and thought that the only true money was what they called the specie, meaning gold or silver. He wasn't against credit, meaning the promise to pay that money, but he was against the pyramiding of credit through the agency of a fractional reserve bank, if that makes sense. So he regarded Hamilton as a fake war hero and as a flyer of kites of insubstantial bank credit. That was his take on Hamilton.
Interesting.
Also, he didn't like him.
Yeah.
Did I mention that?
Interesting. Yeah. So you know, you're definitely an expert on Adams. And do you see financial similarities between Adams and Coolidge?
Oh, I think it's a temperamental similarity. Adams was, in personality, he let few thoughts go unexpressed, especially on paper. And he comes down to us in the 21st century for that reason as a cranky and ornery and sometimes self-pitying character. But he only had the thoughts, did Adams, that all of us have, but he expressed them. Sure. Which is perhaps his gift to us, but also it helped unmake his reputation in a degree as one of the founders, because he revealed his vulnerabilities and his anxieties. I'm kind of veering away from Coolidge, about whom I know actually very little. But insofar as Calvin Coolidge was Silent Cal, he and the expressive John Adams were 180 degrees exactly apart.
That's great. That's fantastic. So what is the most important point that you want to make today that you hope the audience remembers?
Well, I want to trace the timeline between financial orthodoxy and the improvisational, quite speculative, and quite novel set of arrangements that we have today. And the transition between the old-time religion and the new-time, what might we call this? Infidelity. So between the old-time saints and the present-day infidels, that transition occurred through the 1950s and 60s. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the 1950s, you find is the chairman of the Fed testifying before a Senate investigation in the financial condition of the United States. The Fed chairman at the time, William McChesney Martin, was asked, was it a mistake to get off the gold standard? And Martin said, yeah, it was a mistake. And I guarantee you that not only would no contemporary Fed chairman say that, no contemporary Fed chairman would dream it. Because it's the standards have changed, the world has changed, attitudes towards finance, of course, have changed. And we have evolved actually very suddenly when you think about the only a few decades from a country that was very much a country that financially speaking, Hamilton and Adams would recognize, Hamilton especially, to a country that would absolutely appall Hamilton, and needless to say, Calvin Coolidge. I don't want to sound too dispirited about all this. I mean, we have an immensely productive and inventive and enterprising economy. It happens, however, to be run with unprecedented levels of debt and a great deal of speculation and a currency that would pass no standard for solidity in the world's history of money, except for standards now prevailing. Only by today's reckoning will the dollar be deemed as anything except a piece of scrap paper. And one does acknowledge the passage of time and the evolution of thought, but I wonder if posterity was all wet and if we alone are enlightened. I do wonder about that.
That's very fascinating. Looking forward to hearing about that.
Well, you got to think it through, Robert. You can't just take what they say and say, oh yes, quite sound. Another couple of $1 trillion worth of paper money. Excellent. Good, well done, Federal Reserve.
Absolutely. Is President Calvin Coolidge's budget and debt legacy still relevant today?
No. No, it's absolutely not relevant. It is something to be studied, and indeed, in some quarters, perhaps this very quarter, revered. It is perhaps, it is something to be emulated, but as a practical matter, it's like my endorsement of the gold standard. We had an event last evening, you might recall, and I said I endorse the gold. Well, if you ask, does the gold standard have any relevance today? What was the question? Is his budget, does Calvin Coolidge's budget?
Yes, and debt
no.
legacy.
The gold standard have any relevance? No. It is something, I feel, I dare say that the fiscal, the students of Calvin Coolidge's fiscal thought and deeds might regard themselves a little bit as I think of myself, as a kind of a medieval monk protecting the illuminated manuscripts from the onslaught of the barbarians. But if you ask a monk what's the practical benefit of what you're doing, say, I don't know, I'm just trying to keep the mob away from the papers. And that's a little bit where I think the Coolidge fiscal steward, contemporary Coolidge fiscal admirers, and where the keepers of the flame of the gold standard fit into the world today. We are rarefied creatures. So you did ask about practical things, didn't you?
I did.
Yeah.
So what do you think Americans today should remember from Coolidge?
How to spell his name to start with. I don't think there's a great deal of. I think that notwithstanding the extraordinary and hugely successful entrepreneurial efforts of Ebony Schlage, the people she's collected around herself, and the ideas that she is propagating, and it's a remarkable thing, and I dare say that her efforts are bearing some fruit. Look at yourself. Look at the young people who are clustering around her. So I think that if you ask what is Calvin Coolidge's influence, I would say it's negligible. However, thanks to Amity's untiring, remorseless effort. She's on her way to making him a household name. I have no doubt that it's going to happen. I just don't know when.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah,
taking
you're
this
welcome.
time.